DeShaun White comes into 2022 with 169 career tackles as a 3-year starter, Jason. And in many ways, you would have to think that he's kind of the heart of the defense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, he's been a little bit overshadowed by different linebackers that Oklahoma has had over the last few years. You look at Kenneth Murray, you look at Brian Asamoah. But to your point, he is a 3-year starter, and he has been a very productive player for Oklahoma. Probably not where they need quite what they need out of him. And he was a kid, Mark, that was very, very heavily leaning towards looking at going to the next level and starting his professional career. But he wanted to, at the end of the day, he wanted to have the opportunity to play under Brent, and just play under obviously a very elite linebacker coach. And so he has, I think. He has the opportunity to make that next step and just to be a very consistent player for Oklahoma. And so when you look at this, Mark, this linebacker group as a whole, I think there's you have a level of trust certainly that Venables is going to get these guys playing at their peak, right, at the level that they need to be playing at. But I think it's also a group that is probably has the lowest amount of depth on the defensive side of the ball. So Oklahoma can't afford a lot of injuries at this linebacker position. And so since you mentioned DeShaun White, we can start with a middle linebacker. So you've got DeShaun White, who is there's not really much of a battle for me on the middle linebacker spot. I think he's the guy that will be that middle linebacker. I think that one of the interesting guys here is TD Roof. When you look at him, son of head coach, our defensive coordinator, Ted Roof, has moved along, quite a bit as Ted has through his career. Was at Appalachian State last year, and he's a guy, Mark, that I think he knows that. I mean, as you would expect, but he knows the defense in and out. Like he knows it very, very well. But he's probably doesn't have the same athletic ability as some of the other linebackers on campus. So I mean, he'll play. I think he's your backup right now in the middle, and he'll play a lot. Just his ability to know where to be will make up for a little bit of that lack of athleticism. So, and then you got a couple of I think you got a couple of younger guys. Well, one older guy that really hasn't seen the field a lot, Joseph Wette, just hasn't necessarily put it all together. So he'll be probably he'll be third or fourth team, at that middle linebacker. And then you've got Kobe McKenzie, who's a true freshman, very highly touted and highly regarded linebacker within this 2022 cycle. As we've talked about, typically Venables doesn't like to play freshmen as much, but I think he's a kid that has the body, but it's just kind of getting him up to speed and learning that. So I think he's a guy that you probably see play four games in redshirt this year. But certainly he could end up being much better than anticipated, and certainly um, could crack his way into that two deep, so to speak. And then you move to the weak side. You've got this one's a little bit more of a competitive battle. I think going into the season, you like Danny Stutzman as your as your starting weak side linebacker. Played really, really well towards the end of the season. Got to play in that because of opt outs. Was it Brian Asamoah specifically was able to get a start. Played well. Had 8 tackles and a sack in that game, and so he battled a little bit of an elbow issue, throughout the year, and then certainly your typical freshman learning curves. But he's a guy that um, I think that has your great typical linebacker mentality. Has excellent speed. Just kind of knows where to be, and so even though there's a battle there, I think he's the guy that is your likely starter there. I think the one guy, and it'll be interesting to see, Mark, where he gets placed in this defense is Jaron Kinnick. So he's a true freshman. I think most people kind of remember the story. He was committed to Clemson. He decided that he didn't necessarily want to be at Clemson with that move from Venables from Clemson to Oklahoma, and then essentially followed Venables. He wasn't willing at the time wasn't willing to offer him a scholarship because he didn't want to really kind of pluck players from Dabo, but wanted to be at Oklahoma, wanted to be with Brent and the staff so bad that he initially walked on, and then after conversations with Dabo, they obviously ended up giving him a scholarship. Heard great things, like really, really good things about him so far in the summer. Was here in the spring, so got that opportunity to kind of learn. As I mentioned, Venables doesn't like to play a lot of freshmen. I think this is a guy that's probably a little bit different. I think he'll play some. Where that ends up being, I'm not sure. Probably your weak side linebacker, but it could also be in that little hybrid linebacker nickelback cheetah position that Venables likes to employ. So look for him to play a lot. Very interested to see. For people to kind of watch him on how he progresses through the fall and how he plays here. So a couple other guys to keep your mind on. David Aguero has really kind of changed his body and changed. He's played a decent amount for Oklahoma over the last couple of years. Again, just looking for much more consistency, much more consistent play out of him this year, and he'll certainly be in the mix. I would say, kind of depending on what happens with Kinnick and whether they move him to more of the cheetah position. I think Aguero probably is right there for a battle on the backup spot. And then you got Shane Witter, who's a guy that's probably the fastest linebacker on the team, probably the most athletic linebacker on the team, but he's not had that consistency in being able to kind of put that all together. So you've got, Mark, within those four, you've got four really good, honestly, really talented linebackers that have an opportunity in it to play, and it'll be interesting to see how that battle really kind of manifests itself through fall camp. And then we kind of talked about this a little bit on the defensive line, but it's more of a linebacker position when you look at the edge guys. So I think right now you're probably going into it. Your clear starter is going to be Marcus Stripling. Had a really, really good spring, maybe the best defensive player on the field in the spring game, and then played really well towards the end of the season, specifically against Oregon in the bowl game. And so he's kind of really just transferred that over from where he's at in the summer compared to where he was at last year. So but I think the wild card here is Clayton Smith. Does he have the ability to put it together? I think he's your backup at the edge right now going into fall camp, but the athleticism, I think he probably has a higher ceiling than what Marcus Stripling has. But again, with when you look at the experience, Marcus Stripling's a senior, Clayton Smith is just a redshirt freshman. So I think he'll see the field. I think he has elite athleticism to bring to that position. So it'll be again interesting to follow him during camp to see how he keeps progressing and he learns the defense and if he's in a position to help Oklahoma as much as I think a lot of us think and hope that he can.